it's about as embarrassing a moment as the Cowboys have had since, I guess, the early 2000s when they couldn't even put a winning record together. But the standard in Dallas is supposed to be higher than that. And this is just a very, very unfortunate reminder of how far the standard has fallen.
One of my most surprises since I've been involved in sport, period.
Oh, don't you worry, Jerry Jones. You were not the only one that was surprised. It's a little bit of a theme for Wild Card Weekend. Hi there. Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon. I'm Dave Helman. And yeah, surprise would be an understatement for the whole weekend. We had a couple of upsets. How about the surprise of the fact that we've only played 4 wild card games to date? Since the last time we did a show, one of those games got moved. The Buffalo Bills and the Pittsburgh Steelers play today as a result of the winter storm in the Buffalo area. So yeah, we have a completely different show than we expected to do for starters, but we led with Jerry Jones for a reason, because that is going to take all of the headlines coming out of this wild card weekend. The Green Bay Packers march in to AT&T Stadium and dismantle Jerry Jones's Dallas Cowboys by a score of 48-32 in one of the more surprising playoff games that I've ever seen. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I looked this up during the game. Yes, the Cowboys scored some points at the end to make it much closer. But at times in the third and fourth quarter, when they were trailing by 24 plus points, the Dallas Cowboys were on the receiving end of one of the 5 worst home losses in the wild card era. Goes all the way back to 1978, guys. Been playing wild card games for almost 50 years in the NFL. And prior to some late game stat padding, we'll call it, the Dallas Cowboys were getting wrecked at a level we just don't see from division champions in these types of games. It was shocking, and we got a lot to say about it. But for starters, we got to give the Green Bay Packers their love. Like, yes, there's a lot to say about the number 2 seed in the NFC playoffs crashing out so unceremoniously. But the Green Bay Packers did win. They got a phenomenal performance from their young quarterback, Jordan Love, who continues to be a dude. So as we bring in Greg Olsen and Kevin Burkhardt, our guys on the call in Arlington, that's where we're going to start with the Green Bay Packers and a phenomenal day from them. Guys, I feel bad because on a night like tonight, there's a million places I could go for Green Bay, right? So many great performances, but when the quarterback making his first playoff start is an incompletion away from a perfect passer rating, I think that's got to take top billing. I mean, what was working for Jordan Love? Or maybe the better question is, what wasn't? I mean, goodness gracious.
Yeah, I'm laughing because the only reason he didn't have a perfect passer rating is because they're trying to salt the game when he throws a little, flare and just misses to Tucker Kraft. Otherwise, he had a perfect rating. But that's neither here nor there. Look, I keep going back to Thanksgiving game, but that's where their season turned around. I remember you saying we walked out of that booth and you're like, man, this kid is good. And your first playoff game is that was unbelievable.
Yeah, I think we all knew he was good. I think he took it to another level here. Yeah. I think this is where you kind of cement yourself and saying, okay, not only am I a full-time starter in this league, obviously that had been put to rest weeks ago, but he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I mean, the last 8 weeks of the regular season, then of course here, first round of the playoffs, you can't suggest otherwise. I mean, I don't even know how else to put it. I mean, this is as dominant of a win as we've seen in years. And it was done by a team of a bunch of guys that before the season had really never played football at the professional level.
It's crazy. I mean, and everyone in the NFC North thinking, okay, you know what? Maybe this is our time to take over the division. Maybe not.
Maybe not, indeed. I hate to turn the focus away from such a great performance by Green Bay, but I mean, it's the first number 2 seed to lose in this new playoff format for Dallas. It's a brutal loss by them. Y'all are in the building. I mean, what was the vibe there in Dallas with this game getting so out of hand for them? And where do you see this going after such a big disappointment?
I don't know. It's funny. We were talking there was almost a quiet vibe to this game in the beginning. I don't know what it was. Maybe because it was 10 degrees out here before the game. But look, this team thought they were a Super Bowl team, and who can blame them? And they were great this year. They won 12 games. They were dominant at home. They figured they had at least 2 home games if they handled their own business and then go from there. The answer is I don't know where to go, because they've been as successful in the regular season as any team in the league under Mike McCarthy. It just hasn't translated in the postseason.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any easy solutions. I think if anybody knew, okay, this is exactly why the regular season doesn't translate into the postseason, I think they're lying. I think it's a combination of things. I think at the surface level, they played really bad. This is the worst they've ever played at home in 2 years, right? So you start there, and then you start pulling away the layers of, okay, how do they rebuild this team? How do they get a little better on defense, defending the run? They're not going to play every game in a pass environment, making the opposing team trail them. Having all these defensive backs out there that can't stop the run doesn't matter if they can rush the passer. So I think there's some roster stuff, some philosophy stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks with Dan Quinn. Is he going to get a head job? Dak Prescott's contract, CeeDee Lamb's contract. They've got a lot of things to answer. They knew it was coming in the after the postseason. Nobody in Dallas thought the postseason would end this quickly.
Lot of questions for the Cowboys, but that is not the Packers' problem. They're on to the divisional round. Guys, we'll talk to y'all next weekend. I appreciate it, as always.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Let me reiterate to any Packer fan listening, we're going to get to your team. In fact, our own Fox Sports NFC North writer, Carmen Vitali, was at AT&T Stadium Sunday night. We're going to talk to her all things Packers coming up in just a few minutes. But I covered the Dallas Cowboys for 10 years. I'm one way or another invested in this whole drama far more than I'd like to admit. And that's where we're going to start with, in my time around the team, what I truly feel has to be considered the worst collapse of the modern era, the worst collapse of the post-triplets era, when the Cowboys could regularly be expected to make noise in the playoffs. And look, I mean, if you want to rehash the actual game, we can. If you listen to the NFL on Fox podcast, I have a feeling you saw it. Dan Quinn and the Dallas defense had absolutely no answer for Jordan Love. Their coverage was completely overwhelmed by the Packers' receiving options, by the play calls Matt LaFleur was dialing up. We'll get into more of that later. Dak Prescott, I've been quick to defend him my entire career. To quote him, I sucked tonight. Dak Prescott was bad. All of the stats in the box score, I mean, you can throw for all the hundreds of yards that you want, but in the competitive portion of this game, it was practically no contest. And I'll tell you why it's so jarring and so much more disappointing than normal. I've heard this narrative going around for a while that the Cowboys choke in the playoffs. Dak Prescott, the word is choke in the playoffs. And honestly, I've taken issue with it for a while, because going back through the years, yes, the Cowboys have obviously lost playoff games. They haven't been in the Super Bowl since 1995. But choking implies losing a game you were supposed to win. And walk me back through those. Okay, 2014 and 2016 to Green Bay. Yes, in one of those games at least, the Cowboys were the higher-seeded team. But you're talking about playing eventual 4-time MVP Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. One of those on the road. Is that a choke? Is it a choke for a rookie Dak Prescott to lose to a 2-time MVP Aaron Rodgers? I personally don't think so. Is it a choke to go to Lambeau Field and lose in the final minutes to an MVP and Aaron Rodgers? I don't think so. Fast forward to 2021. Yes, they lose to a lower-seeded San Francisco team. They were 3-point favorites at home in that game against a 49er team that had 2 years ago been in the Super Bowl, that knew what it take to win in the playoffs. Last year, they do what they're supposed to. They win this wild card game as a favorite. They go to San Francisco and play that same stacked Niners team that had just been in an NFC title game. Hard-fought game, clearly overmatched by San Francisco, but they were underdogs and they lost by 7. Again, to the biggest bully in the NFC, the Niners, who have regularly gone through these wars year after year. All of these exits are disappointing. They're not no-shows of the magnitude of being a 7-point home favorite against a team that's quite literally never done this. Yes, of course, there are some veterans on Green Bay's roster, some guys that know what it's like to play in big playoff spots. But when you're playing a first-year starter at quarterback who's never done this before, you're supposed to have the mental edge as well as the talent edge. And guess what? The paper says the Cowboys should have plenty of talent. Prior to this game, the all-pro teams were released. All of the big team honors have been announced short of MVP and the major individual awards. And the Cowboys stack up just as well as anybody in the NFL. 9 all-pros. 1,700-yard receiver in CeeDee Lamb, who inexplicably went MIA for the first 40 minutes of this game. Dak Prescott, named an all-pro. A lot of people were stumping for him to win MVP heading into this game. A defensive player of the year candidate in Micah Parsons, the league interception leader in Deron Bland, 2 potential Hall of Fame offensive linemen, a promising young guard. People will tell you Tyler Smith was one of the best handful of guards in the NFL this year. The most consistent kicker in football. Need I go on? It's not to say the Packers were hopelessly overmatched. Clearly not. But this, more than any game that's happened in the last couple of decades, is a game the Dallas Cowboys were supposed to win. They got blown off the field. And that, like I said, hours and hours after the game, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And from listening to Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, he feels the exact same way.
But this seems like the most painful because we all had such great expectation and we had hope for this team, and thought that we were aligned in great shape, and it didn't happen for us, and it's as fresh on me right now as it is on anybody else. But I won't get into any of the addressing of any aspects of it, any part of it, from the coaching to the players to what's around the corner.
I can't predict to a certainty what's around the corner as far as it pertains to Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy, but I'm going to guess you want to keep an eye on this space and the NFL news cycle over the next 2 or 3 days. Hopefully this isn't out of date already by the time you've heard it. But I think after a stretch like this, keep in mind the Dallas Cowboys have the second most regular season wins in the NFL over the last 3 years. The only team they trail is the Kansas City Chiefs, the standard that everybody is chasing in the league currently. And what do they have to show for it? Other than a series of embarrassing exits, this one, the most embarrassing of all. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to call for Mike McCarthy's job, but I will tell you, I won't be surprised if sometime today, sometime Tuesday, he is no longer the coach of the Dallas Cowboys, or Dan Quinn, the highly coveted defensive coordinator who's interviewed for head coaching jobs. Won't be surprised if whether it's for a new job or simply it's time for something different, if he is on the way out as well. I think drastic changes are on the way. And even past the next 3 days, what's around the corner feels bleak to me for the Dallas Cowboys. And that's why heading into this season, I picked them to win the Super Bowl. And I'm not even embarrassed about it, because my logic was, and I've said this 100 times, if not now, then when? I laid out everything that they have on their roster. I laid out what they've done in the regular season. If they had taken care of business, they would have been guaranteed at least 2 home playoff games. It was all there. There's nothing missing from this recipe on paper anyway. Clearly, it's missing when they actually have to play these postseason games. Now, fast forward. I mentioned Hall of Fame offensive lineman Tyron Smith, headed for free agency, nearing the end of a decorated career. Tony Pollard is a free agent. You got free agents among your key difference makers all over your defense. Then there's the matter of the contracts that need to be handed out. CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons are due to be paid at the top of the market at 2 of the most lucrative positions in football. How are you going to juggle that while trying to put a competitive team around them? And then there's the matter of the quarterback. Honestly, your opinion of Dak Prescott is kind of irrelevant at this point. He fell way, way short of the expectations in this game. It's one of the low points of his career, maybe the lowest of all, because, again, at least you lose to the 49ers and throw 2 interceptions. That's almost expected given the circumstances. He was expected to really put his stamp on this game, and he fell woefully short. I can hear the angry Facebook fans saying, cut him or trade him, get him off the team today. It's not realistic. He's entering the final year of a contract that's slated to cost the Cowboys $60 million against the cap. honestly, the only thing that could help the Cowboys from a financial standpoint is to extend him. We had these conversations earlier in the season. Does anybody want to do that right now? I don't blame you if you don't based on this showing, but what's the alternative? Fielding a roster that's crippled by that cap hit that damn sure can't be better than the team that just got bounced in the wild card round? I don't know the answer. We don't have to know the answer in January, but like I said, next year's team looks like it's going to have a long road in front of it to even hope to be as good as this one. And this one fell 4 full wins short of the ultimate goal. It's about as embarrassing a moment as the Cowboys have had since, I guess, the early 2000s when they couldn't even put a winning record together. But the standard in Dallas is supposed to be higher than that. And this is just a very, very unfortunate reminder of how far the standard has fallen. Okay. I had to get all of that off my chest. I think I did a good job. So there's plenty more to talk about here. It's the result of the weekend, so we are going to spend a little bit of extra time on it. And now, as promised, there's plenty to talk about from the Packers' standpoint as they get ready to go back on the road and face the San Francisco 49ers. And to talk through all of that, my bud, Carmen Vitali, joins me now. All right, Carm, let's start with an interesting tidbit I just heard from you. You were there in the bowels of AT&T Stadium after this game, and you tell me that despite upsetting the number 2 seed as the last team into the playoffs, the Green Bay Packers weren't all that hype about this?
It was pretty much business as usual, Dave, which we've heard all season long how quarterback Jordan Love, it might be his first year starter, but this guy is no rookie, and he is even keel. He is even Steven, never gets too high, never gets too low, which is a wonderful characteristic of a quarterback. But at the same time, I think I expected a little bit of emotion out of him coming into the tunnel off the field. And yet it was just business as usual. This is what was supposed to happen. Nobody was surprised, apparently.
Do you attribute that? I mean, look, the guy's on a heater, which, by the way, I'm going to continue to insist you take a little bit of a victory lap here. The guy just posted basically a perfect passer rating to get his first playoff win. Is that the influence of Jordan Love, do you think? Is it just the confidence that they've been playing with here over the last month? Is it Matt LaFleur? What do you attribute that kind of quiet confidence to?
I think that's how Jordan Love is as a person in general. This doesn't seem like this is a departure at all from who he was the last 3 years when he was with the organization riding the bench behind Aaron Rodgers. You never heard from Jordan Love. You never heard stories about Jordan Love, even though he really was champing at the bit to get out there and prove what he could do. That's what he talked about in his press conference after the game, saying it feels good. And he's kind of fighting back a smile. And so I think he was kind of trying to keep himself a little bit more even keel. But at the same time, everything is coming together for the Packers at this point. The offense is clicking because they have more experience together. They have more experience against NFL opponents. And then you also have Matt LaFleur now having more trust in his offense because he can tell that they're clicking and he's opening up the playbook. And like we saw, you had Aaron Jones running all over the place, doing things that he does against the Cowboys every single time. And you had Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave both. Luke Musgrave finally got into the end zone on that tight end leak play that they ran against the Chicago Bears in week 1. Although Luke stumbled on that play, and this one he got a touchdown. So everything is just coming together for the Packers, and pretty much it seems like they expected this to happen all along.
I want to go back to that, and okay, I'm glad you're here to remind me. It was the season opener. Like as soon as I saw that leak play by Luke Musgrave, I was like, "Holy crap!" Yep. They pulled it back out of the bag. But that was my big. Wait, I'm sorry. What?
No, they pulled it back out. That was the exact play. That's what Luke told us in the locker room afterwards.
I love it a lot, and I feel like it's a theme for the night. All due respect to Aaron Jones, I mean, the guy clearly goes off against the Cowboys. He had a wonderful night, but my biggest takeaway from watching this offense was just how discombobulated the Cowboys look trying to cover it. I mean, even without the Musgrave play, you've just got guys breaking open, getting lost in the zone. You talked about Matt LaFleur opening up his playbook. How dangerous is it when you mix this kind of talent with this type of play calling? Because it seemed like they were both in their bag on equal sides.
Yeah, it's so well-rounded. And the biggest thing that hit me was that Dallas clearly didn't game plan for Romeo Doubs. And why would they have? He has had kind of a quiet couple of weeks. He's had a quiet season for that matter. We all thought that Romeo Doubs was going to be Jordan Love's number one target. Hasn't quite worked out that way because he's given way to guys like Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and these guys that were not on anyone's radar before. So when that happens, you can only game plan for so many people if you're the Dallas Cowboys or if you're any defense. And at that point now, you saw what Romeo Doubs was able to do, those just gashing chunk plays where he gets completely lost in the zone and nobody is accounting for him. And he's picking up 20 plus yards on nearly every single one of his catches. This is a guy that had over 150 yards in his first playoff game. It's incredible.
So let me ask you this. And I asked the same question to Greg Olsen and Kevin Burkhardt. I've covered some dark moments at AT&T Stadium. I've been there for some really deflating losses. This really feels like it takes the cake for me. And whether it was the vibe in the building when the score started to get away from him, or Jerry Jones in the postgame facing all of these questions about what's to come in the future. I mean, I guess for lack of a better phrasing, how bad was it there for a Cowboys team that, it seemed like on their end, they thought that this was going to be a formality and it was anything but that.
That was blatantly obvious. Honestly, the Dallas Cowboys came in, and even those first couple of plays completely controlled the line of scrimmage. They had every expectation they were going to win this game, and why not? They're playing a bunch of no-names, as I believe Jaquan Brisker of the Chicago Bears called these guys. And they didn't know what to expect. Nobody knew what to expect out of Green Bay, but that's the fun part of this league. I don't think I accounted for the fact that Dallas, though, wasn't going to be able to do something they've been doing all season, which is get the ball to CeeDee Lamb. He had 2 catches that first half. It's just incredible when you think about the fact that this was a high-flying offense with an MVP caliber quarterback playing at home where they've been so successful, and they just couldn't muster anything. They couldn't get anything going. And it was against a Joe Barry defense, which has taken its lumps, we all know, this season, but behind a pass rush. And let me tell you, this Green Bay secondary, they came up with some huge plays, including multiple interceptions. This is a team that only had 7 interceptions in the regular season. And now this is in the first playoff game, in the first half of a playoff game, you get an interception. And then you also get a pick 6 for Darnell Savage, who was so he didn't even care about it, that in the locker room, he didn't even talk. He was like, nah, I don't, like, other guys can talk. I don't feel like talking. After getting a pick 6, what are we doing?
A pick 6 that broke the game open, my guy. Give yourself
broke the game.
a little bit more of a pat on the back. I mean, I was sitting there watching thinking, okay, Dallas has a chance to climb back in this thing here. They can cut it and they get the ball after halftime. Maybe this could be dicey. And Darnell Savage said, absolutely not, which I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but the Packers are going to need their DBs to travel again next week. We don't have to preview Packers-Niners right now, but it is awfully fitting that this young team that seems like they don't know what they don't know, they now have a chance to go slay the dragon that has plagued them all these years. I love how that, everything kind of comes together in the end and they get a chance to try to do what former Packer teams couldn't.
Yeah, we talked about the wild card round with NFL scriptwriters being in their bag, but it looks like that's only continuing. You have the Cowboys melting down as they've done. The Packers have won 10 of their last 11 games against Dallas. They have been the Cowboys' boogeyman. And even without Aaron Rodgers, they're still the stuff of nightmares for these guys. But now they're going to go into San Francisco and play a team that's been their boogeyman and has been the ones that they can't get past. And Matt LaFleur in particular. Also, Matt LaFleur going against his mentor and Kyle Shanahan. It's just going to be an incredible game. I don't know how long this Packers ride is going, but let me tell you, even if they're not outwardly showing it, this Green Bay Packers team and these Green Bay Packer fans are going to ride it and have a lot of fun as long as it goes.
I don't blame them. I was prepared for a lot of outcomes. I don't think I was prepared for the Packers to flex their muscle so completely. Like as fun and joyous as it must feel for Green Bay, that is how disappointing and bleak it must feel for the Cowboys to not just lose, But to really get run off their own field as a 7-point favorite, it's going to take some time to process it. But Carmen Vitali, you have done wonders to help me understand. Safe travels back from DFW. I appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
We've obviously got a lot to say about the Green Bay Packers after a win like that, and we're going to keep it going in the Sunday Six with our coaching spotlight. Who else to feature but the coaching staff of the Green Bay Packers? Today's coaching spotlight is brought to you by Verizon. It's the official private wireless network of the NFL's coach-to-coach communications. And there's multiple people I want to highlight here, but let's start it off with the star of the show, Matt LaFleur. There's so much debate about where Matt LaFleur ranks in the hierarchy of NFL coaches. He coached Aaron Rodgers to back-to-back MVPs, plenty of success with the Packers over the course of his time there, but he had Aaron Rodgers. He had the greatest quarterback in the league at the time, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. How much of it was really the coach and how much was the player? Well, rewind to where things stood for Green Bay with the youngest roster in the NFL. Maybe you've heard that stat a few times over the course of the last week. First-year starter at quarterback. Their top 6 receivers are all first and second-year players. You knew there were going to be growing pains, and the hope that their defense would carry them through it turned out to be a fatally flawed logic. They finished the season 27th in total defensive DVOA. So even the idea that, hey, if the defense can keep us in some games, the offense can figure it out, that wasn't even true for the vast majority of this season. At midseason, the Green Bay Packers were 3-6. They'd scored more than 20 points on just 2 occasions all season long. Now, fast forward to where we are right now with the Green Bay Packers heading into the divisional round of the playoffs. The rebuild happened faster than you could ever imagine. You know, there's construction going on by your house, and 1 minute it's a hole in the ground and you blink an eye and it's a fully formed building. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with here in Green Bay as Jordan Love finishes a point away from a perfect passer rating. The Packers zip up and down the field on a once fearsome Dallas Cowboys defense. You've got Romeo Doubs looking like a guy. You've got 2 different tight ends making plays all over this offense. The star of the season, Jaden Reed, the Packers' leading receiver, didn't even play as big of a role as he's used to, as more and more pieces of this thing just continue to come along. And on top of all of the young talent, Matt LaFleur was just flipping every switch at just the right time. The play calls were always right. The balance was perfect, got the running game involved. Felt like a dozen of the Packers play calls left the Cowboys completely discombobulated. Looked like Dallas tried to play a lot more zone defense than usual against Green Bay. I would call it a failed experiment with the way Jordan Love was able to diagnose it, find his guys, and then flip over to the other side. Because yes, Matt LaFleur deserves flowers. I think he deserves more mention in the Coach of the Year conversation. I don't think he'll win it, but I don't think that's crazy. But let's make sure we give some credit to a guy who is maybe the most maligned coach in the NFL this season, a guy that I have criticized plenty over the course of the year. That would be defensive coordinator Joe Barry, the third-year guy who has overseen one of the most disappointing units in the NFL this season. I don't know if one great game changes the entire conversation. I'm sure Packers fans are listening to this right now saying, no, absolutely not. We still need to change some things there. But right now, in the playoffs where nothing else matters, credit to Joe Barry for putting together a game plan that completely befuddled the Dallas Cowboys while this game was still in doubt. Look at the box score, and it's going to tell you the Cowboys scored a lot of points and gained a lot of yards. It's bogus. If you watch this game, you know Dak Prescott had no answers for what Green Bay was doing when this game was still up in the air. I mentioned Dallas playing more zone coverage. It looked like Dak had no idea what to do with Green Bay playing zone. How many throws were into areas where a defender was lurking and Dak didn't even see it? How many ill-advised decisions did he get away with? And that's not to mention the ones that he didn't. A pick 6 by Darnell Savage is what put this game basically out of reach, minus the garbage time rally. And he was just hanging out in his zone, and Dak completely lost track of him. Maybe it's basic stuff, but while this score was close, the Dallas offense had no clue what to do. They seemed completely discombobulated. They could not handle Green Bay's coverage. And I would argue Dak had a clean pocket most of the night as well. So it's not even the age-old issue of pressure. Dak Prescott just couldn't handle the different looks that he was getting. It's a credit to Joe Barry. It's a credit, obviously, plenty of talented players on Green Bay's defense. They haven't always lived up to it. And on Sunday, they did. I don't give a damn what the box score says. A phenomenal performance from Joe Barry and his guys to hold the Cowboys down until Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, and his offense took care of the rest. An incredible performance all around on Sunday and throughout the season to take a team that far too many people wrote off from the beginning and push them into the final 8 of the 2023 season. Incredible stuff. All right, I think we've hit Cowboys Packers from just about every angle imaginable. So let's move on to the most entertaining game of the wild card round so far, at least. That would be the Sunday night finale. The LA Rams heading up to Detroit. We talked about it. Everybody knows Matthew Stafford going back to his old team. Jared Goff trying to stick one to Sean McVay and the Rams. And you know what? He did. The Lions outlast the LA Rams 24-23, thanks to some gutsy decision-making by Dan Campbell at the end. Get to that in a minute. Just a fun, physical football game through and through. So many big-time throws between Stafford and Goff. Some key stops from the defenses, which were seen as the weak units in this game. Talk in a second about the red zone and the factor that it played. But in a weekend where, I mean, let's be honest, like the drama was a little bit lacking in the first 3 games. Lions-Rams really delivered. And here to talk to me about it now, we got our friend Eric Williams, Fox Sports NFC West writer, to break it all down. All right, Eric, for a game like this, let's obviously start at the end. I love the guts by Dan Campbell to go for the gusto there in a tight moment. And at the same time, I'm guessing Sean McVay maybe wishes he had a couple of those timeouts available there in the final 2 or so minutes of this game.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, Dave, when he had to waste them early in the second half, because of clock management issues in terms of, getting the playoff. And you're right, obviously he could have used them at the end of the game to maybe extend the game a little bit. But, bottom line, give the Detroit Lions props. They played the game the way that they needed to play it, kind of played keep away a little bit from LA's offense. To be able to score touchdowns on the first 3 drives, I think was big to get momentum early, because you knew at some point the Rams were going to get going on offense. And then really this game was decided in the red zone. Rams were 0 for 3 in the red zone, had to settle for 3 field goals. The Lions were 3 for 3 in the red zone with 3 touchdowns. And I think, that was what kind of sealed it for the Rams. That was
going to be where I went next. The Rams got to the 11 or closer 3 times. So it's not even just stalling out in the red zone, but a couple of times stalling out inside the 10-yard line. What did you see in those sequences, whether, play calling on Sean McVay's part or obviously execution there by Detroit to proverbially bend but not break?
I think it's about trust. And I think in that situation, Matthew Stafford trusts Cooper Kupp. But if Cooper Kupp can't win, then who else is he going to go to in that situation? And you saw that even when Kupp was covered, he was going to him and trying to see if he could make a play. And Kupp wasn't able to create separation in those moments. I also thought he could have ran the football a little bit more in that situation to try to loosen up them defensively, or maybe look to go to somebody like Tutu Atwell. So I think maybe more diversity in terms of what they were calling there. And that's been something that they've dealt with over the year, in terms of whether or not they're calling enough runs in the red zone to kind of keep defenses honest and not just, targeting Kupp every time.
Please take this wherever you want to go with it. And maybe it sounds silly because both these teams won double-digit games, but I feel like this was the biggest showcase of the year for both the Rams and the Lions in terms of just having the entire NFL community watching their game. And so many amazing performances. I mean, Puka Nacua showing everybody what he's all about. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a wonderful night catching the clutch pass there at the end to help the Lions put it away. Aiden Hutchinson, 2 sacks on the night. So many fantastic performances. Did anybody in particular on either side really jump out to you?
Yeah, I can't believe we got this far along without talking about Puka, who just was a beast, continue to just kind of, make plays all over the field, missed tackles, creating missed tackles and winning contested catches. And I thought kind of single-handedly at times carried that offense. Kyron Williams at times, showed some bursts, even though he had the hand injury. I think we talked about it earlier. For me, it was Detroit's offensive line kind of allowed them to control this game because of their ability to create balance by allowing them to run the football. And then for the most part, keeping Jared Goff clean, which means keeping Aaron Donald off of him. You didn't really hear Aaron Donald's name much. And that's a good thing if you're the Detroit Lions. So I think you got to give them a lot of credit for what they were able to get done offensively.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you watch the game, Matthew Stafford's just had such a fun season. The throws that he makes, the way he sees the field right now. But a really understated performance from Jared Goff as well. Just managed this game. And, I think that term has such a negative connotation, but I thought Jared Goff did such a phenomenal job of taking what was available to him, being aggressive when he needed to be, and not making the mistakes that have doomed the Lions so often this season. When he has these 2 and 3 turnover games, that's when it typically goes south. What do you think could be ahead for the Lions if, like you said, their offensive line is able to dictate games like this moving deeper into the playoffs?
I just think you see Jared Goff at his best. I mean, you mentioned it. He didn't turn the ball over, but he also made some big boy throws that allowed them to score points. They have some talented playmakers on the outside. Josh Reynolds, another former Ram, played well for them, a guy that he's comfortable throwing the ball to. They get another home game. I think that's big. You're either going to be playing the Bucs or the Eagles. Your Cowboys, of course, I'm sure you talked a bunch about that, are done for the year. So for them to be able to get another home game is huge with the way that the crowd has kind of rallied around them in the community, their first playoff win in 32 years. So yeah, I think they're an interesting team to watch move forward. If they can kind of sneak past one, whether it's the Bucs or the Eagles, and I'm assuming it's going to be the Niners, but I guess we can't make any assumptions now. Packers playing pretty good. They have a chance to make a little run here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, we beat that officiating controversy with the Lions and the Cowboys into the ground as far as we could. But yeah, on behalf of all Cowboy-related media, this does feel like some karma's not the right word, but it's so fitting that the Cowboys slip up opens the door for the Lions to be in such a better position and get that extra home game. We'll see what they could do with it. You are our NFC West writer, so I'll end it here. We'll have more time to talk about the Lions. Their season's not done. I'm interested by the Rams here because, on one level, it's such a fun success story, such a young team that so many people didn't see coming. But at the same time, so many veteran leaders and those guys, your Staffords, your Donalds, not getting any younger. Mm-hmm. We got all offseason to talk about it, but in the short term, how do you view this? I guess all playoff exits are missed opportunities, but maybe the future is a little bit brighter than your average team that just lost a heartbreaker.
Yeah, I think so, because like we talked about, they never expected to be in this situation anyway, based on where their roster was going into the year. I think if they would have finished around 500, I think that they would have considered that a success for this team. Instead, they get to double-digit wins, as you mentioned. They develop a lot of young players that are able to experience the postseason, which I think is big because of the heightened sense of intensity for these games. And so they get a taste of that. And now you can go back and kind of continue to kind of build on what you have. It looks like you have a number one receiver in Puka Nacua. You have another guy that can rush from the interior in Kobe Turner, and you found a legit, number one back in Kyron Williams. So you're able to figure out a lot of important positions on the field. Matthew Stafford, like you mentioned, though, is not getting any younger. Aaron Donald's not getting any younger. Cooper Kupp, And so what do you do with those guys moving forward because you have a much younger team? Are you trying to replace those guys? Are you going to sign off for them being around for another year and continue to build around those pieces? It looks like Sean McVay is energized and is going to go into the offseason, wanting to do more with this team. I think that's good. But you are concerned a little bit with Matthew Stafford and the injuries keep piling up, and can he continue to play at an elite level?
Gutsy effort, speaking of that, on his part to get through that game in front of the old hometown crowd. But it is the Detroit Lions who come out on top. They continue their march through the postseason. Don't worry, though, Eric. You do still have a team playing in this postseason. And, yeah, you're right. That I don't know if Niners-Packers, if I would have thought that it had juice, a month ago. But it certainly does right now. And I can't wait to talk to you about it when we get closer to divisional weekend. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. Sounds good. Take care, Dave.
All right, let's keep our Sunday 6 moving by throwing it back to Saturday, the Saturday night game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins. I hope everybody at Arrowhead, I hope everybody in that part of the country has had a chance to thaw out a little bit. The fourth coldest game in NFL history sees the Chiefs romp to a not an easy win. The Dolphins made them kick a lot of field goals, made them work for it down in the red zone. Kansas City Chiefs get away with a 26-7 win, a game that never really felt like it was in doubt after, late in the second quarter. When did Tyreek Hill score that touchdown? Yeah. Tyreek scores a minute into the second quarter. You think maybe we got a game on our hands, and it's really all Chiefs from there. Even with a 13-7 lead, it felt really safe. Yes, it's cliche. Yes, it's easy to put it all on the quarterback, but this game, more than anything, was just a demonstration of what it can do for you when you have that guy versus when you have not that guy. I guess that sounds mean to Tua Tagovailoa. I'm not trying to close the book on his career, but the difference in this game was palpable. Patrick Mahomes, in negative whatever weather, fourth coldest game on record. You go into it thinking it's going to be this ground and pound game. Patrick Mahomes throws the ball 41 times for 262 yards and a touchdown, which isn't, don't get me wrong, it's not mind-boggling by anybody's standards, let alone Patrick's. But the ability to air the ball out in that wind and that cold, the display of arm strength, the timing, Vic Fangio sent the house at him 18 times, blitzing him all night because the Dolphins didn't have a pass rush, and it didn't matter a lick because the guy can rifle it in there in literally any condition. Rashee Rice is the beneficiary, 8 for 130 and a touchdown. All of a sudden you say, Rashee Rice, the rookie out of SMU, he's been showing flashes all year. If you're looking for a bright spot in the Chiefs receiver core, it's been him. But he's had his down moments as well. That's why the Chiefs are in this position playing on Wild Card Weekend in the first place. But if it looks like that, you can see the vision. You can see the vision for how the Chiefs piece this thing together. Rashee Rice with a smattering of Travis Kelce. He did have a bad drop early, but didn't come back to bite him. Get just enough going on the ground. And oh yeah, Patrick Mahomes, when his rocket arm's not doing all the work, he scrambles just twice. But those two scrambles go for 41 yards. They pick up huge conversions on eventual field goal drives. So between the two runs and the 39-yard completion to Rashee Rice, Patrick Mahomes kept 3 field goal drives alive on a night where the Chiefs needed 4 of them. Cannot understate this guy's impact. Oh, and he blew his helmet up too. They had to replace it. He's missing chunks out of it because turns out you're not supposed to get hit in the head in -4 degrees. Who would have thought that helmets weren't cut out for that? Just a phenomenal night. And then you flip over to the other side of this, and I think you see the limitations of the Miami Dolphins offense when the conditions aren't just right. The Dolphins, other than the Hail Mary touchdown to Tyreek Hill, which was underthrown in the first place, the Dolphins looked like a team that knew they couldn't push the ball downfield. Don't think Tua Tagovailoa had the arm strength to whip it through the wind and in the cold conditions to try anything downfield. And Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense, they just sat on every route underneath, all of the screens, all of the underneath balls. They were ready for it. I'm looking at my monitor right now. It says Tua finished with 199 yards, when the game was still up in the air, it was far, far less than that. I think at the start of the fourth quarter or late in the third, Tua had thrown a mere 15 passes. A, because the Dolphins couldn't stay on the field long enough to try anything else, and B, because none of the passes he was attempting were getting converted. Like I said, this doesn't need to be a referendum on the Tua era. I don't know what the Dolphins do from here. He does need a new contract soon. He was part of that 2020 draft class. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert have already gotten their second deals. Do the Dolphins make him the third? He's played well enough to be a Pro Bowler. He's led the most explosive offense in football under Mike McDaniel the last 2 years. But you've seen how toothless it can look in big moments. And look, I know I'm well aware of the extent of the injuries facing the Dolphins in the home stretch of this season. But now go compare it with Fangio's defense in Miami, how many guys they're missing, who they were forced to play at Arrowhead, and how they performed against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, as opposed to this offense, which again, other than a fluke play that the best receiver in football did most of the work on, this is as toothless and as not scary as I've ever seen the Miami Dolphins look. And I can hear the angst in Miami. I don't know the answer. It's similar to the situation with Dak Prescott. This isn't something that has to be decided in January, but I won't be surprised if the last two finishes here, starting so hot and fading so obviously, I wonder if it prompts soul searching. The year before, it was injuries that derailed things with Tua. He was healthy this year. He had a phenomenal year, but you saw the limitations. And, you know, you could also point out, maybe you just win a few more regular season games. You get to play this in Miami, but can you count on that? Can you count on trusting that if you're at home in all the right conditions, you can be more successful than this? I say no. You're going to have years, you're going to have games where you have to do crazy stuff like go to Arrowhead Stadium and compete in freezing temperatures. And the Dolphins, specifically on offense, didn't pass the test in this one. We'll see what they do moving forward. Plenty of time to talk about them as usual. But the Kansas City Chiefs, they advance, and now they wait to see. They might still get a home game out of this in the divisional round, depending on what happens between the Bills and Steelers. We'll keep an eye on that as we move toward divisional weekend. The Houston Texans weren't as big of an underdog as the Green Bay Packers in the Saturday early game, but they technically were a 1.5-point home dog against the Cleveland Browns, and we all know how that turned out. Green Bay, not the only team to do a little bit of ass kicking as an underdog. The Houston Texans run the Cleveland Browns out of Houston in a 45-14 beatdown. CJ Stroud, absolutely incredible. This Houston offense just continues to be so much fun to watch. By the time Joe Flacco threw 2 pick sixes, I don't think the Texans even needed them. I think this game was heading toward that conclusion anyway, but the 2 defensive touchdowns did a lot to hasten it. Looked like it was going to be a banger for about 25 minutes, back and forth in the early going of this game, and then it just became a blowout, a banner day for the Texans. They move on to the divisional round. To help me break it all down, who better to talk to than our guy, Fox Sports AFC South writer Ben Arthur, who joins me to talk about the Texans' run to the divisional round. All right, Ben, if there was any part of us that thought the Texans were just a feel-good story, I think it went away when CJ Stroud posted a damn near perfect passer rating against the best defense in football. We're not surprised. We know he's been great all season, but to put a performance like that on tape in the playoffs against that group, does it elevate your expectation about what the Texans might be capable of in these playoffs? Because I think not very many people had them going beyond the first, maybe the second round, but that looked like a very, very dangerous team on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, Dave, this was kind of my inkling to heading into the postseason, right? I think everyone expected like the Browns to win, even with CJ playing, but I just kept thinking, like we as you kind of alluded to as well, like we just know what CJ Stroud has proven to be at this level. And when you have a quarterback of that caliber who, regardless of what's thrown at him, the stakes, the pressure, what he's working with or not working with, you have a great chance to win with a quarterback like him. So whoever they end up facing in the divisional round, you have to have some fear if you're that other team. You just can't really predict where this is going just because of CJ Stroud's greatness. This team has a lot of flaws kind of across the board, like on both sides of the ball, and maybe they're a little young and inexperienced, but just because of Stroud, you can never really count them out in any game. So whether they end up going to Baltimore or whether they end up going to Kansas City, both situations, you know that they're going to be the underdog, and many would expect the Texans to lose, but because of CJ Stroud, you can't count them out because he's proven just too much at this point to count against him.
CJ is incredible. We know that. He makes 6 throws every game day that there's only 3 people on earth that can do that. But aside from his talent, I was struck by the job that Houston offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick did against Cleveland. Like I said, Stroud made some incredible plays, but there were also some beautifully schemed looks in this game. You know, the 76-yard touchdown untouched by Brevin Jordan. Yeah, just stuff like that makes you say, holy cow, I did the math on this. 358 yards on just 38 plays when the starters were in and the Texans were still trying. I mean, that's a first down per snap against this mighty Cleveland defense. We know Bobby Slowick is a name in coaching searching circles. How much did you see this as an audition? I mean, how impressed must teams with coaching vacancies be by the job he's done?
Yeah, that was one hell of a audition, right? Like in the playoffs, the #1 defense in the NFL, just elite, even historically great, according to some measures in terms of pass defense, and to really just constantly attack the pass defense, right? Like most of the Texans' damage was done via pass, particularly in that first half. They had completions of 76, 37, 27, 20. Like it was just insane. And I know CJ spoke post game about that aggressiveness that Bobby wanted the offense to play with, wanting to dial up these shots, not having any fear against this elite secondary that the Browns have. And so I think that says a lot about Bobby Slowick, just in terms of his confidence, the aggression that he can dial up. And then I think something we've seen throughout the year is just how he's empowered CJ, right? Like Bobby isn't responsible for CJ, right? Like for how great he is, but I think in the way he's empowered him and trusted him and trusted his insight at times. I think especially early in the year, just really wanting to hear CJ's feedback on certain things and how CJ was feeling. Like we don't always see coordinators have so much confidence, especially early on in rookie quarterbacks, regardless of the talent. And so I think that foundation for them to be as in sync as they were on Saturday, that blueprint was laid early in the year. And so you can look at the play calling, you can look at that aggression as I spoke about, but really building that trust and that ultimate confidence in a quarterback who came in kind of unproven despite the talent, and to really empower him to continue to do what he's done, I think speaks highly about him. And I know that's something that these teams with head coaching vacancies are looking at as well, because it's not only about like how smart you are, like how you can scheme these guys up, but how do you maybe empower the players that you coach? How much do you instill confidence in those guys? And I think Bobby has shown that throughout the season.
I have a feeling his phone's going to be ringing a little bit here as we get later into January. I'm curious, one element of this offense, the Texans didn't need it. We talked about how aggressive they were in the passing game, but Devin Singletary continues to be on a little bit of a heater here. He had a nice day against Cleveland. He had a solid final month of the season. We don't know who Houston's going to play yet, But going against defenses, regardless of whether it's Kansas City or Baltimore, I would imagine they're going to need that run game to show up a little bit more than it has for them. How useful is it, or how encouraging is it to see Singletary continue this?
No, it's been great, Dave. Like if you're from the Texans' vantage point, really from the second half of the season on, I mean, he's been one of the most effective and productive running backs in all of football. And I know we discussed this on like earlier shows, but the Texans' run game really struggled early in the year, and Dameon Pierce didn't have that same juice that he had as a rookie last year, and Devin Singletary came in, and he's kind of just taken reins of that job and given this offense the sense of balance that it had been looking for since the start of the year. The Texans going into this season wanted to actually, it's hard to believe now, but they actually wanted to be a run first team. That's what DeMeco Ryans had talked about. That's what Bobby had been talking about, using the run to kind of set up play action and all that jazz and whatnot. But it's really been CJ carrying this offense afloat. But now that you just have that other component, like if these, like going into the divisional round, like if the Ravens or the Chiefs are able to kind of limit that explosiveness in the pass game, you have a back and Devin Singletary who could help out, right? Alleviate some of that pressure to just make it harder for the opposing defense, just in terms of like kind of maybe not knowing what to expect, right? Like, okay, you have to account for CJ's arm and what he's able to do with his pass catchers, but just knowing that you could get gashed in the run game in Devin Singletary. And so I think he's been really special, obviously, and he's a really patient runner, I think, as well. And he just makes them that much more dangerous, because CJ isn't always going to look like CJ, right? There are going to be times where it's going to be tougher sledding in the passing game, and just knowing you have a dependable back to kind of take that pressure off has paid, and I think will continue to pay big dividends for Houston moving forward.
Let's finish with the Texans defense, because I mean, everybody knows about Will Anderson Jr., and I hope people know about Jonathan Grenard. But other than that, this isn't a unit stocked with household names. And yet the Browns scored their final points on like their third possession of the game. Like early second quarter, they scored their second touchdown, and Houston shut them down after that. Obviously, the two picks are a big part of that, but the Browns couldn't move the ball after that, even before the turnovers. What did DeMeco Ryans adjust that led to that dominance after the early explosion?
Yeah, I think for one, you have to give a lot of credit to Derek Stingley Jr. And you spoke about how this Texans defense doesn't really have any household names. I think in a year or two, like Derek Stingley should be that kind of guy. I mean, he doesn't maybe have the personality, that kind of aura, that brashness that is maybe typical of like a number one corner. But man, he totally erased Amari Cooper in the game. If you remember, he had he put up 265 receiving yards in that first matchup between the Texans and the Browns on Christmas Eve, and he completely shut him down. I think for the game, Amari only had like 4 catches, but when covered by Derek Stingley, I think he only had 1 catch for negative something yards. And so I think a lot of credit deserves to go to him, just in terms of that passing game. And this Texans defense has been very vulnerable to explosive pass plays, and we saw it early in this game. But to be able to shut down Amari Cooper, keep him in check, I think Derek Stingley deserves a lot of credit. Who else? I think I think just on the flip side, like with the Browns, like as great as Joe Flacco has played this season, he has been vulnerable to interceptions. and giveaways. And when the Texans front was able to get pressure, that's how you end up with those back-to-back pick sixes. And so that goes beyond Jonathan Grenard and Will Anderson Jr. I think the guys in the interior, Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins, did an excellent job. Like, all those guys on that front played injured. Like, that entire defensive line was questionable entering the game. And so for them to play the way that they did, I think was huge too. So it really, the tone really starts with that front. But I think when you look at the back end, you really have to start with what Derek Stingley has done, like the former number 3 overall pick, because if they weren't able to keep Amari Cooper in check, it could have been a completely different game. And so I think the fact that they were able to keep that in order, I think is why you get that result that we saw on Saturday night.
It's so incredible how many of the key contributors on this team are as young as they are, whether it's CJ, Nico Collins, only a year 3 pro, Derek Stingley, very young, Will Anderson, very young. You wouldn't know it. We'll find out where they play today, but either way, it's going to be against an MVP quarterback, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. It's going to be thrilling stuff. Ben, I expect I will talk to you about it soon. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
That does it for the games that have been played in the wild card weekend, but let's continue the Sunday 6 by talking about the games left ahead of us. It's games plural. Steelers-Bills was supposed to happen Sunday morning, but like I said, since the last time we recorded, it was postponed due to inclement weather. Crazy, heavy snowfall, lake effect snow in the Buffalo area. If you saw the photos and video of what was going on up there on Sunday afternoon, I completely understand the decision to postpone it to Monday. Hopefully everybody stayed safe. Looked like multiple feet of snowfall. Hope everybody affected by that dealt with it well. But outside of that, I'm not complaining about having a doubleheader on Monday. 2 playoff games, Bills, Steelers, followed by Eagles, Buccaneers. So we're going to preview both of them here on a Monday. For starters, we had already scheduled this when we thought it was the only game of the day. Philadelphia Eagles trying to save a disappointing finish to the season. They go down to take on the NFC South champ Buccaneers. And my guy, NFC East reporter Ralph Vacchiano, joins me now to talk about the injury situation with Philly, as well as what to expect in this matchup. All right, Ralph, I want to start with the guy who's actually playing, and then we'll get to the guy who's sitting out. But Jalen Hurts not carrying an injury designation. Not surprised to hear that he's going to play. Of course, he's going to tough through it. But how much do you think that finger is an issue? Because we all know just because you're playing doesn't mean it's 100% right. How much do you think that's going to limit him?
Well, I think it's a big issue. I think it's something that they're very concerned about. He didn't practice the first day they had practice during the week. He obviously couldn't play in the second half last Sunday. When you have that, it's not just rest. You're not resting a guy for no reason this time of year, obviously. So he's hurting. From what we've been told, he practiced fully. Everything that I've heard was he looked good in practice. But that, of course, that's what you're going to hear leading up to a playoff game. No one's going to admit if he's struggling at all or if he's in a lot of pain. And Jalen Hurts has never really let on about any of his injuries, how much he's dealing with. But you're talking about his throwing hand. And until we actually see him out there throwing the football, it does make me wonder how accurate he's going to be, how strong his throws are going to be, and whether maybe they'll have to rely on the running game a little bit more.
Which, I mean, I feel like you and I have been screaming that for about 6 weeks. Maybe the Eagles watch the tape of their game against Tampa earlier this season and hand the ball to DeAndre Swift a little bit more often. But I mean, in the passing game, I did the math on this. The Eagles, they don't really mix it up. They do what they're good at. When Jalen Hurts throws the ball 30% of the time this season, he targets A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown obviously not going to play in this game with that knee injury. So, again, this is a team, they target like 3 guys. It's Dallas Goedert when he's healthy and the 2 receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So without such a huge part of this, what do the Eagles do to fill in that gap?
You're right. And they, when they do target A.J. Brown that much, they can get away with it because they have good other options. But now you would think they're going to have to lean on Devonta Smith. And then I don't know who the other option is. They've never really developed a good third receiver. I assume Quez Watkins will probably start for A.J. Brown, but he's been spotty as a third receiver. Julio Jones is clearly not what he once was. Dallas Goedert, with the somewhat struggles of the offensive line, even though it's really good, hasn't been exactly what it was last year. He stays in the block sometimes a little bit more, hasn't been used as much as I think he should be used. He was obviously hurt late in the year too. So, really their passing game, the only viable option to really dominate the passing game is Devontae Smith. And, obviously Todd Bowles knows that. They're going to not only blitz Jalen Hurts to try to rush his throws. I'm sure they will have double coverage and more on Smith and make it as hard as possible. But it's a real legitimate problem for the Eagles. They are, in the passing game, very much a one-dimensional team. They're, they may be Brown heavy in most of their games this year, but they've never been one-dimensional. This time they're going to be one-dimensional. Everybody knows where that ball is going to have to go, especially if they're looking for a big play.
You mentioned Todd Bowles, and I'm fascinated by that element of this. The Eagles beat the Bucs in Tampa back in week 3. It was a 14-point win, but Jalen Hurts struggled a bit in that game. The Buccaneers picked him off twice. With a second opportunity and with the limitations on this Philadelphia offense, how do you see that matchup playing a part here with Todd Bowles being a pretty renowned guy for being bringing pressure and for making you uncomfortable?
Yeah, he's a good defensive coach and known for his blitzing defenses. And if you've watched the Eagles the last half of the season, even if you just watched the last week against the Giants, that offensive line is struggling picking up the blitz. And I can't tell you whether it's the linemen are struggling to do it or the assignments are wrong and the scheme is off. We've talked about this. My feeling that something has been off with this offensive scheme all year long. And lately it's been picking up blitzes, putting too much pressure on Hurts. The Giants, who are, a blitzing team, but not a good defense, were all over Hurts in that game. And, the Bucs have a better defense. Bowles is a better blitzer. I think it could be a lot of trouble, especially when you're taking one weapon in the passing game out. If you're Todd Bowles, not only do you know blitz Jalen Hurts, you know now who to cover to make sure he can't dump the ball off for a big play. And that is just playing right into his advantage. And I think it could make for a very long day for the Eagles offense.
I love this subplot over on the other side. I think if you follow football, you know how atrocious the Eagles defense has been. Mike Evans and this Tampa Bay passing attack doesn't sound like a great opponent given what we've seen here, but they get Darius Slay back with a chance to try to revitalize that. And if that wasn't interesting enough, the de facto Philadelphia defensive coordinator right now is Matt Patricia, his old coach in Detroit, who he didn't really get along with very well, let's say. How do you see that shaping up? And is Darius Slay enough to give you any sort of renewed confidence in the Eagles secondary?
Well, it helps. He's been their best corner all year long. They have Avonte Maddox back as well, and that helps. James Bradbury has not played well this season, which has really contributed to some of their secondary issues. But when you get your number one guy back, it's certainly not going to hurt the defense. My question is, he had surgery on his knee. He had a couple of weeks off. How healthy is he going to be? Is this rushing to get back for the playoffs? Can he do all the things that he did before? If he can, you got a really good matchup. If he's limited at all, you might have a problem back there. Because again, the Eagles are not getting the kind of pressure that they got last year. Their defense, the tackling has been an issue that includes the secondary, and the coverage hasn't been great. So, they do need Darius Slay back, but I think it's an open question to ask what kind of Darius Slay is he actually going to be?
We know the Eagles haven't gotten sacks at the level that they did last year, but there's still plenty of talented options there rushing the quarterback. With Baker Mayfield limited himself, do you think Patricia trusts his front four to get home alone, or do you see a more pressure-oriented game plan for Philadelphia as well?
Man, for just the first few weeks, it's been really hard for me to get a read on exactly what Matt Patricia wants to do with this defense. We talked about some of the situational things like Hassan Reddick dropping into coverage way more than normally he would drop into coverage. To me, if I'm Matt Patricia, I'm selling out for pressuring the quarterback. It's what the Eagles do best. I don't know that I would completely trust my front four to do it alone. They're not the same front four that they were a year ago. Jalen Carter's been great, but he's definitely hit a wall. At least over the last 4 or 5 games. Hassan Reddick has dropped off too. But again, we talked about how he's dropped too much into coverage. I don't think Josh Sweat has had a very good year. I'd help him out. I wouldn't just say, let me leave the front four there, let him go after Baker Mayfield. I'd add some blitzes in too, and just whatever I can to disrupt Mayfield. I think if you can disrupt Mayfield, there's a really good chance that their defense could play much better. He's not, you're not talking about one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL here. You're talking about somebody that you can rattle into making some mistakes. And if the Eagles give him time, though, he's talented enough for him to pick them apart. So I wouldn't trust that front four if I were him. I suspect he's probably going to bring a little pressure, but we'll see. We haven't seen a lot of variety from him out of the first couple of games he's called plays.
I've been struck by how good Baker has been extending plays. You're not going to see crazy rushing stats from him, but if he has time in the pocket, or even B, if he's got time to extend the play and find somebody downfield, it can be really dangerous. I'm with you. I would try to get guys right in his face. I would try to hit him as often as possible. If that means risking explosive plays on the back end, I think it's probably worth the risk. But I'm very interested to see maybe having a little extra personnel on the back end will help Matt Patricia out. It's going to be a good one. And Ralph, more so than the game itself, I'm interested to see how the storyline changes from here. Obviously, if the Eagles win, maybe you get some confidence about putting a run together. And if they lose, it might be the worst vibes in the entire NFL heading to the offseason after this year started. So I can't wait to check in with you about this one, win or lose. I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. We'll have a lot to talk about, no doubt about it.
It's easy to preview the game we knew was going to happen, but we do still have to talk about the game that got postponed. We talked some Steelers-Bills last week, if you want to go back and catch that, but with a game Monday, I'm curious to see how these weather conditions affect this. I mean, it was already going to be the case, right? But just because this storm advisory has passed doesn't mean weather won't be part of this. It looks like temperatures in the Buffalo area are going to be in the teens, maybe the low 20s for kickoff. I would imagine wind is going to be part of it. Doesn't look like there's any snow expected to fall, but I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest there will be a lot of it on the ground at Highmark Stadium. Still rough conditions for these guys to play in, although I don't think Chiefs and Dolphins players want to hear about that. I'm curious, though, having watched that Dolphins-Chiefs game, it's easy to assume in a game, in a situation like this, that you're going to lean on the run, take the passing element out of it, try not to let the weather affect the matchup. I would guess that's what the Steelers are going to do, as well as Najee Harris has been running the ball, as much as that's their identity in Pittsburgh. But after watching Patrick Mahomes fling the ball around in -20 or -20 wind chill, what might Josh Allen be able to do for an encore as long as the wind's not blowing 50 miles per hour directly back at him? He certainly has the arm strength to air it out within reason. And then obviously the guy can carry the ball and do anything he wants to on the ground. I think it's going to be a big Josh Allen day. I would look for him to throw the ball as much as he can. And I'm going to guess Josh Allen finishes over 40, 50 yards rushing in this game. I said it last week. I still feel this way. I'll take the Bills to win, but 9.5 points is a large spread for a playoff game against a defense and a coach as good as Mike Tomlin. I'll take the Bills to win close. Yeah, and we'll see just how much this weather affects things moving forward. Like I said, not mad about having 2 playoff games to watch. The first 4 were plenty unpredictable. We'll see what we get today. That does it for Wild Card previews. It feels so weird to still be previewing Wild Card on Monday. But in the meantime, as he always does, Jay Glazer stopped by our studio on Sunday during the games to chat. Had a chance to talk to him about the direction New England is moving in, with Gerard Mayo getting announced as their new head coach, as well as what Bill Belichick might be up to. That seems especially interesting right now in light of certain results, and a whole host of other stuff. Check out our conversation with Jay. All right, we're back once again for another edition of Ask Glazer with Jay Glazer. Happy playoffs, my man. How are you?
I like it, man. Happy playoffs.
Okay. You tipped us off to this last week on Fox, Bill Belichick on his way out in New England. That is official now.
Yep.
So we might as well see where you can take us with this story so far. The question is, can Gerard Mayo really fix the Pats? And then the second half of that, do you have an inkling on where Bill Belichick might be coaching moving forward?
Well, the Pats, they still have, look, they need a quarterback still. There's still a lot of things that they have to do personnel-wise to kind of build that place up. I can tell you this, when Mayo interviewed down in Philadelphia, he blew him out of the water, crushed a few years ago. So I think the Kraft's looking and saying, okay, he's going to be the heir apparent. We already know who we want in there. But that's big shoes to fill. You know what? Whenever you fill the shoes of a legend, a lot of times some of your players just automatically go, well, that's not how Bill would have done it, or Bill would have done it this way, or Bill would have done it that way. And you got to fight a lot of that. But, yeah, I mean, Mayo has he's a good young rising star in this league. So they do need a lot more personnel pieces, though, to help him out. Now, as far as where Bill goes, I've always thought Atlanta since the start of it. I thought early on, I thought also like they're the first ones to make a fire in Arthur Smith,
right,
and then didn't put a slip in for anybody else. And no one realized it. Like they didn't put a slip in until, much
Do you
later.
think, like, are they trying to throw people off the scent by putting in slips since then? Like,
well, I think they got to prepare themselves no matter what. And you have to interview a certain amount of people anyway.
Right.
So they can't just go get Bill and that's that. And I do know that they're fishing around for other things as well. But I think that a guy like Belichick, yeah, he's certainly on the radar. I think when I was told that Arthur Blank wanted to go big game hunting, he wants a big name in there.
Okay, I don't know.
But I think Washington also kind of looking at him. I think all these openings, I know that they've discussed Bill.
So, and I was doing it too. It was so easy to connect the dots of Mike Vrabel potentially winding up in New England because that's where he played.
Yep.
Obviously, that's not going to be the case. So the question from Brad,
I think we all thought that, but there's a deal in place already for Mayo in there, which the owner still could have said, okay, you know what, we're going to pay it anyway and then pay Vrabel. So I was a little surprised that didn't happen. Yeah.
What do you think that means for Vrabel? And specifically, this listener viewer wants to know if he has any potential in Carolina, but really anywhere that you might have heard as far as Mike Vrabel goes.
I haven't heard anything with Vrabel yet. Again, I thought everybody thought he was going to go to New England, and that didn't happen.
It was just so easy, you know?
Yeah, of course. It made all sense. Man, as far as Carolina and him, that'd be an interesting one. I think how he would get along with the owner down there.
Personalities maybe involved there, some strong personalities.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one.
As we're recording this, the Eagles haven't played Tampa Bay, so we'll see how it goes, obviously, but just such a striking end to their season, the way that it's kind of fallen apart. If they lose, I mean, it seems like there's going to be changes regardless, but where do you think Nick Sirianni stands with ownership in Philly if they just completely fall off?
I think he's good. I don't think he goes anywhere. He's done a really great job the last couple of years. The problem there with the Eagles, like when you have adversity, you don't really get grace. Like other places, they have bad games. Like the 49ers, they get, smashed by the Ravens, and it's just like, okay, adversity is a gift. We take our butt whippings like a man, we go back, and all of a sudden, bam, they come back and play great. There are a lot of teams that are able to bounce back and do that. At Philadelphia, there's no such thing as like a little molehill. Everything's a mountain in there. It becomes a lot, and it becomes heavier and heavier, whoever's coaching in there. And this same organization, they got Andy Reid out, they got Doug Peterson after, winning a Super Bowl, and I think Nick's going through a similar thing.
Yeah, it is. It speaks to the passion there that a year removed from a Super Bowl. I'm interested to see how that goes. I would imagine, with the run that they've put together, he would be fine. But it's going to be an interesting conversation if there's.
I am not hearing that he's out.
Fair enough. Then the last one for you. Last time I talked to you, Jim Harbaugh hadn't played for a national championship yet. He has now won it for Michigan, but not a lot of movement on the front of where his future lies than.
I think there is Chargers. Yeah, the Chargers. He'll go out there and interview, I think, next week. He's been linked to the Raiders, but Chargers makes an awful lot of sense. What he could do with Justin Herbert and, having, just for the area. Plus, I love the Chargers job, too, because they're opening up. People out there, they don't know what El Segundo is. It's a little beach town over here.
Not too shabby.
But it's fantastic. They're opening up this incredible training facility and headquarters over there. It's going to be amazing. Like, waking up and going to work there is going to be amazing. So I think he's a great fit over there. They're still looking for GM candidates, too, like which GM candidate will work with him. But I think that would be the front runner right now for him.
LA Chargers. That would be a heck of a lot of fun. We'll see how it goes. I imagine as more teams start getting eliminated from the postseason, maybe you'll see some of this
I think
stuff.
you'll see a couple more surprises here too. So you good.
What a teaser from our own Jay Glazer. I can't wait to see where this leads. Thanks for the time, man.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
That does it for the Sunday Six. That does it for our show. But don't you worry, we will be back Tuesday. We got 2 wild card games to recap. We'll see what happens with Bills Steelers as well as Bucs Eagles. We'll see what that means for the divisional round. There's only one divisional matchup set right now. We know we've got Packers at Niners on Saturday night. There's still 3 other matchups to get to. We know the Texans are in. We know the Lions are in. We know the Ravens will be part of it, but we'll see what the matchups are. As soon as those games end, we'll be in on Tuesday to break it all down. Not to mention the coaching carousel. There could be some hirings. For all we know, there could be some firings as well. We'll see where the news cycle takes us. You're going to want to stay tuned. Please, if you haven't done it, go subscribe on Spotify. Go find us on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you like to get your podcasts, you can find us there, the NFL on Fox podcast. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be with you this week, the week after that, all the way up until Super Bowl 58, wall-to-wall NFL playoff coverage. Everything else in between, you get the drill. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll talk to you then. Appreciate it. Catch you next time.